Welcome to the Monty Collier Report. I'm Monty Collier. In this video, I will be discussing G.C. Berkouwer and Dutch mysticism's mixing of law and gospel. They're teaching a justification by faith in works. Dutch mystic G.C. Berkouwer mixes the law and the gospel, implying the popish dogma of justification by faith in works, when he teaches that saving faith necessarily contains our obedience. This is an outrageous mixing of law and gospel, a conflating of faith and works. This heretical mistake is commonly made today by neo-legalists following the traditions of lordship salvation, the new perspective on Paul, shepherdism, and so on. Let's now consider what Berkouwer writes. I quote, "The obedience of faith. This is another expression which gives us a hint as to the nature of faith. It too may seem, at first sight, to water down our sola gratia, for obedience is a correlative of law. Does it not put the stamp of legalism on faith and betray it as a new work of the old law? The obedience of faith, however, does not involve subjugation to a general law. It is not susceptible to characterization according to its formal structure as a dutiful subjection. This obedience and subjection cannot be abstracted from him to whom the believer subjects himself. We cannot close our eyes to the element of obedience in faith. But if we see it aright, we shall realize that it serves to show us how completely faith is directed to its object. Recall Paul's description of total subjection as imprisonment. The man who is obedient in faith subjects all reasoning and every consideration in servitude to Christ. Obedience is essential to faith, for it illustrates the truth that faith is not autonomous and self-sufficient, that it capitulates in total surrender. To hear the gospel is to obey it. Not to hear is to disobey it, and to believe is the same as to hear and obey." End quote. From Berkouwer's book Faith and Justification, Chapter 7, pages 195 through 196. Berkouwer has departed from the Reformed faith. In Calvinism, faith is always passive in justification before God, never active. It is only the object of justifying faith, Jesus Christ our surety and what he alone did for us, Christ's imputed righteousness, that justifies us before God's court. It is not the strength or quality of our faith, but its object, the gospel in its proper and saving sense. That justifies us before God. To believe is a stated verb, not an action verb. It is Arminianism that teaches the act of our faith justifies, rather than just its object. This is known as the heresy of evangelical obedience. Now in Calvinism, we deny the heresy of evangelical obedience, for we reject the teaching that faith is our obedience that justifies. For example, such a blasphemous notion would contradict Acts chapter 13, verses 38 through 39, Romans chapter 3, verse 28, as well as Galatians chapter 2, verse 16, for example. This mistake by Berkouwer also asserts the old Roman Catholic heresy of fides formata, which teaches that faith is made perfect by our love or works. Justification by faith and works. The Roman Catholic view of saving faith is tripartite, having three elements: understanding the gospel, belief in the gospel, and the sinner's works or penance. But in Calvinism, saving faith is bipartite, that is, it has two elements: understanding the gospel and simple belief in the gospel. The Bible teaches that simple belief in the gospel, saving faith, necessarily causes the justified believer to do good works, Justification causes sanctification, and sanctification causes us to do good works. Both justification and sanctification are monergistic. See Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. Our obedience is the necessary result of faith, not part of it. See Romans 14, verse 23, and Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. So the term obedience of faith, found in Romans 16, verse 26, refers to a justified sinner who not only believes the gospel, but also has begun obeying the commands of Jesus, third use of the law, and as a result of saving faith. The obedience done by justified sinners in this life is not necessary for salvation. Our obedience does not justify us, not before our conversion, nor after our conversion. It is only the perfect work of Christ alone that is the legal basis for God to pronounce us righteous. Our good works are necessary to glorify God and to help our fellow man. See 1 Corinthians 10:31 and Titus chapter 3, verse 8. By blasphemously redefining justifying faith to include our works, Berkouwer has Roman Catholicized the term sola fide, justification before God by belief alone. He has Catholicized that term to mean fides formata, that is, justification before God by belief and works. Berkouwer has transformed the Calvinist doctrine of sola fide into the papist dogma of fides formata. The utter confusion of today's Dutch mystics have understandably led some people to say, beware of Dutch theologians. God bless.